Hello, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. A very good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone present for today's Manthan. The topic for which is transport and logistics services. Udyog Manthan, an initiative by DPIIT, is a marathon of webinars focusing on promoting quality and productivity in Indian industry. The deliberations will follow a set of structure, starting with the setting of the context, then half an hour session by each of our panelists, followed by a discussion and a Q&A round. Participants are requested to keep their mics and cameras to avoid any disruptions. The chat box will be open for asking questions, and we will be taking it later in the Q&A session. Also, speakers are requested to switch on their camera while they speak. As we know that the transport and the logistics industry are evolving rapidly and regarded as the backbone of the economy, and quick, efficient, and economical transport of goods across India, and many commercial sectors also rely on it. So, hence the discussion will focus on understanding the challenges and opportunities concerning the productivity and quality, and aim to draw in best practices and expertise of sector and industry with the view of solving them to promote local for local and ultimately the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Today we are extremely grateful to have Mr. Anand Swarup, Joint Secretary Logistics, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry with us to set the context for the webinar. Mr. Anand Swarup has over 25 years of experience of working in one of the world's largest logistics organization, the Indian Railways. He has served on a very important assignment like being the Executive Director in the Railway Minister's Office and the Permanent Mission of India to the World Trade Organization in Geneva. He has a rich experience of handling trade issues, trade remedies, intellectual property rights, apart from human resource management and logistics and supply chain. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to participate in this meeting. As Suparna rightly mentioned, logistics.
He has a rich experience of handling trade issues, trade remedies, intellectual property rights, apart from human resource management and logistics and supply chain. Over to you, sir.
Transport and logistics is a key segment. It cuts across all, whether it is agriculture, manufacturing, and anything related to logistics.
The
The government of India
trade
realized
issues, trade remedies, intellectual property rights, apart from human resource management and logistics and supply chain. Over to you, sir.
Transport and logistics is a key segment. It cuts across all, whether it is agriculture, manufacturing, and anything related to logistics. We can see the government of India has realized the
Trade remedies, intellectual property rights, apart from human resource management and
according to that
logistics and
study in
supply
India,
chain.
the rate of transport transport and logistics is a key segment. It cuts across all, whether it is agriculture, manufacturing, and anything related to logistics. We can see the government of India has realized the damages
Trade remedies, intellectual property rights, apart from human resource management and
according to that
logistics and
study in
supply
India,
chain.
the rate of transport transport and logistics is a key segment. It cuts across all, whether it is agriculture, manufacturing, and anything related to logistics. We can see the government of India has realized the damages disrupting domestic trade and according to that study in India, India identified across its tracks 500 days accidents, 500 days disruption to improve their quality, they have to improve their productivity so that the lead distance where railway becomes economical also gets reduced. But we've also seen the highways in India, although we have the second largest network of roads. improve their productivity so that the lead distance where railway becomes economical also gets reduced.
For the deliberation. Mr. S.P. Singh has been appointed by Department of Personnel and Training Policy as a Joint Secretary through UPSC and is working with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He has varied experience of project execution, contract management, and policy formulation. He is the main arc and procurement member of Damodar Valley Corporation. He is also joined for the deliberation. Mr. S.P. Singh has been appointed by the Department of Personnel and Training Policy as a Joint Secretary through UPSC and is working with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He has varied experience of project execution, contract management, and policy formulation. He is the main arc and procurement member of Damodar Valley Corporation. He is also joined for the deliberation. Mr. S.P. Singh has been appointed by the Department of Personnel and Training Policy as a Joint Secretary through UPSC and is working with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He has varied experience of project execution, contract management, and policy formulation. He is the main arc and procurement member of Damodar Valley Corporation. He is also joined for the deliberation. Mr. S.P. Singh has been appointed by the Department of Personnel and Training Policy as a Joint Secretary through UPSC and is working with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He has varied experience of project execution, contract management, and policy formulation. He is the main arc and procurement member of Damodar Valley Corporation. He is also joined for the deliberation. Mr. S.P. Singh has been appointed by the Department of Personnel and Training Policy as a Joint Secretary through UPSC and is working with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. He has varied experience of project execution, contract management, and policy formulation. He is the main arc and procurement member of Damodar Valley Corporation. He is also joined for the deliberation.
to see as to how do we establish a performance measurement system in the country so that we really know what we are talking about. So if you need to do more on quality, and there's a lot of background noise, so maybe everyone else would have to mute. Sorry. Yeah, thank you. So, where was it? Okay. So, in case if we want to know, improve upon the quality or the productivity, we should know where we stand, and that's something which is essential. So, just to bring out the context from the context setting, because we need to speak, so we need to start from somewhere. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the energy that the logistics sector sees in this country as of date, and it's 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 the time is now, and it is logistics actually improves country's economic status, its productivity, it is a competitive factor, and there's a lot of work which is being done by the government of India as well as various state governments to move to enhance or to harness the potentials of the logistics services. However, as I said earlier, it's essential to focus these reforms process. And to focus this reforms process today, I would like to present a systematic approach that the government could think of following so as to get more out of whatever it is doing. And here, as one aspect is establishment of a measurement system. And in this, what is being proposed is following a systematic approach or a systems approach, as we call it in research, which involves setting up of goals, action plans, monitoring, evaluation, and then again a feedback mechanism to the objective setting. This whole systems approach is based on one major adage: if you don't know it, you can't fix it. So let's know it to fix it. Now, just taking a step back as to why logistics has gathered so much of energy as of date. Traditionally, as Mr. S.P. Singh mentioned, traditionally logistics was all about moving goods from point A to point B. And if that be the case, it was all about cost centers as to what is the logistics cost. Would you reach from A to B in 100 rupees or 200 rupees? And that used to be the measurement matrix, and on decisions were made based on that. Then came in the time, then came in the quality of services, and then came in reliability and variability. Now, in the meantime, the markets moved from traditional markets to more matured markets. When the markets become mature, the products really cannot be differentiated on the goods quality. So you get similar products to be sold. So a rinse soap or a Nirma soap or an Ariel soap comes to the market. Here, reaching the customer or the logistics services really becomes a benchmark or an indices, which is a measurement of customer service, or it is actually also determining the differentiations of the product, and it actually becomes the key competence of the firm which is trying to reach the market. At the same time, we're also in a very exciting time where technological disruptions are happening. And these technological disruptions are showing us e-commerce, e-retail, where logistics is not only determining the key competence of the firm, it is also the driver of the firm's competitiveness. So if you reach, or if you can reach, you're there. And if you cannot, sorry, thank you, you don't exist. So what is happening? Logistics is actually turning out even to be a final product in some cases, like we see in Amazon and Flipkart and Zomato and Swiggy, where the product is actually delivering, but it turns out to be a product. So what's the import of these changes that is happening? The import is that we need to know what are the measurement matrix or what are the measurement outcomes that you need to know, which can help us establish a performance systems and also monitor the performance outputs. Two basic questions that comes to your mind once you listen to this thing: how to establish one and how to design an LPMS. It's also, if you see, I have kept it sector agnostics because in this context, it's as good or as true for a firm level as it is good for a state level or at a country level. Now, the thing is as to how do you develop these logistics performance measurements. So first you start with identifying objectives, and it is as basic as that. So the national logistics policy, which is getting drafted at the country level sets the objective, sets the tone. It also sets up a case for the states also to follow suit. And then the second is identify stakeholders. The stakeholders run from Ministry of Road Transportation to Ministry of Railways to Ministry of Commerce to Ministry of Logistics, Department of Logistics, then to Ministry of Agriculture, SME, industries, you name it, and they all keep getting enlisted in it. Once, obviously, when you have so many stakeholders, there are reasons for conflicts. So you'll have to settle conflicts and evolve on synergies. Based on these evolved synergies, a performance measure has to be established and drilled down right to the implementation level. These performance measures have to be quantified. So if it is cost of transportation, if it is inventory carrying cost, they need to be quantified. And whatever that cannot be quantified, a pseudo or what we call an indirect quantification methods could be utilized to do that. And obviously monitoring implementation and an institutional mechanism which evaluates the outcomes, benchmarks it with the other countries, and goes back to feedback and restart once again, seeing whether the objectives were in line with. You'll have to.
Excuse me, Ms. Saroj, you have to unmute yourself, please.
I think, okay. So, sorry. So the last one is as to how do you establish it, and how does Joint Secretary Logistics really understands whether this logistics performance measurement system, what he has developed, is good or good to go. So there are some basic measures which you evaluate them on, and then you get that kind of confidence as to whether they are good to go or not. One is comprehensiveness, as to whether all the stakeholders are there or not. Second is whether there is a causal relationship which has been established between two metrics or not, and whether they stand the tests of time. Integrity, obviously, as to there shouldn't be any conflict, that if the truck transportation types have to be increased or decreased from point A to point B, then it shouldn't conflict with the other modes of transport. So that's one. And comparability, obviously, one needs to know as to which one is prioritized, which one comes first, and which one goes second. And in between various metrics, which one has the what weightage or vector associated with it. And the usefulness, and that it actually gives you certain outputs which you take into consideration to drive the policy measures, which gets implemented both at center and state level. I'll stop there. Thank you, and would be open to questions whenever the deliberations start. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ayush. That was a very, detailed but also simply articulated discussion. So thank you for that exposition. And I like how you said, if we don't know it, we can't fix it. And if I may extrapolate, if we can't measure it, we don't know it either. So thank you for that. The World Bank, of course, has been doing excellent, just stellar work everywhere, but also in India, where we know these very famous EODB, ease of doing business rankings. And perhaps it's not as well known that these rankings are essentially World Bank rankings. And for those of us who are on this panel, at least, we watch equally keenly the LPI, Logistics Performance Index rankings, which, of course, you explained through the methodology of this. It's often been spoken about that efficiency, productivity, quality is an outcome of not merely the physical aspects of logistics infrastructure, but also the processes, standards, and skills. So it's, I think, a good way to bring in our next panelist. This is Captain Rama Nujam. Now, Captain Rama Nujam is the Chief Executive Officer at the LSC, or Logistics Sector Skill Council at Chennai. He has an experience of 30 years in maritime logistics and transport. He's been engaged with this skill ecosystem since its very inception in 2010. He feels education and vocational skills are intimately connected and has had the support of academic institutions, industry, the government of India to embed logistics training in the educational sector. I've, of course, always found our interactions very enriching, and I'm looking forward to this one. So, Captain, on to you, please. So, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Bharat. And first, let me confess, invariably in most of these panel discussions, I bring up the rear. But suddenly I find myself positioned as an engine of growth, and that's to me is a very kind of a pleasant experience. Let me state now, why is skilled human resource so important? Now you have my previous speaker, Saroj, speaking about logistics competencies. And in fact, if I remember right, the fourth factor is competence in the whole LPI measurement. So, and this competence is directly related with the human resource and how skilled they are. Now, that's the first aspect. The second is, invariably, like, General Malik, when he talked about the Kargil conflict, he said, you have to fight with what you have. And that is exactly the case even in the logistics. Most of the hard infra is not designed for purpose. It is later on retrofitted to suit. And even for that matter, even moving assets are not fitted for purpose, but fitted with at a later stage. So which means, you don't have both the theme of this discussion, productivity and quality, factored into at the design stage or at the manufacturing stage. Later on, as you keep working, you keep on improvising. It's like, shooting into a shifting goalpost all the time. And so therefore, the importance of the human resource, the skill sets, becomes of paramount importance, especially in a country like India. Now, along with that, take into account the fact that this sector is a very non-aspirational one. And I stated up front, and you have to have ordinary people performing extraordinarily. So you put all this together, you have a very volatile concoction. So against this backdrop, and further, logistics has been a completely disregarded subject in all our vocational training institutions, higher educational institutions, and right from this independence. In fact, even if you go to any bookshop, you will barely find a handful of books on any of the 12 subsectors of logistics. Whereas you go to any bookshop abroad, you will find a whole stack of subjects pertaining to logistics. So you don't have any Indian authored books either to refer to. Against all this backdrop, the Logistics Sector Council, in the last 4 years of its inception, we have firstly scoped this logistics sector into 12 subsectors, which is basically anything to do with storage, distribution, and transportation falls within the purview of logistics, and therefore we have scoped it into 12 subsectors. Now, for these subsectors, our fundamental mandate is to create what are called the job roles, or in technical jargon called the qualification packs, which is nothing but a collection of occupational standards. And this we have done for the 12 subsectors. It would total to something like about 80 odd. Just to give you some sense of perspective, European Union did a study of 259 companies in the state of Tamil Nadu for 4 subsectors, that is warehousing, land transportation, courier, and port terminals, and they came up with over 750 odd job roles. So you can imagine the chaos. Safe Express in Chennai and Coimbatore would have two people with different qualifications, perhaps performing the same kind of a job, or coming with the same qualification and performing different jobs and earning different salaries. It's as chaotic as that. So with this, we have now rationalized this into 80 odd job roles, where it is which permits this rationalized job roles permits lateral mobility as well as vertical mobility, and also permits multitasking, because in India multitasking is a norm rather than an exception. So therefore we have created those job roles. And thereafter, and I very strongly feel that apprenticeship is the route for ensuring skilled human resource, and therefore we laid a great amount of thrust on apprenticeship, and I'm very happy to report the industry readily lapped this up, and we have created the optional trades. Thereafter, with these optional trades and the job roles, which are all industry validated and incorporate international best practices, we then started embedding them in the higher educational format. And incidentally, the new educational policy 2020 recommends this degree apprenticeship, and I'm proud to report that logistics was the first one to initiate this degree apprenticeship program in this country in 2019. We have had an excellent feedback from 300 odd kids who have done this apprenticeship, and I think that's the way to go. And we have now have something for everyone, in the sense we have two ITI trades. We have launched a diploma in logistics technology. We launched 7 programs in undergraduate programs in logistics, covering subjects such as air cargo and aviation services, agri storage and supply chain, land transportation, maritime logistics, e-commerce operations, EXIM and Express. And we have also launched a PG diploma, data science in logistics. And not to leave the school kids, we have started a logistics literacy program. And Ms. Saroj will be happy to note that World Bank has funded a program for 40 schools, 20 in AP and 20 in Maharashtra. And incidentally, that program kick-started yesterday evening. So that's something which we have done. We have created a complete logistics learning management system in-house, which is available for anybody who has the fire in the belly to upskill and reskill. And in addition, we have in our sector a lot of candidates who join, who have dropped out of school, many of them who have not done any kind of logistics training. Therefore, we have gone through the National Institute of Open School and embedded 2 logistics modules in for the 10th and 3 logistics subjects for the 12th. So in essence, if I am a school dropout at 9th, I can pass my 10th exam doing a maths and a language and a social, and 2 logistics subjects which I can learn through tutorials. Similarly, for the class 12, I can do maths and language and 3 logistics domain subjects. Thereafter, we have also launched an online training program, which is the University of Shastra will give the certificate. Along with Shastra, we have launched this online BBA logistics program and an online MBA logistics program. So in effect, we have created 2 parallel streams, learn and earn, and earn and learn. And so long as somebody has a fire in the belly, they can go right up to the post-graduation in logistics. So what's my wish list as or the way ahead that should be? First is, I feel there has to be far greater advocacy from the government, from the industry for apprenticeship, because that's the way to go for to ensure that you have skilled human resource, and especially the students who have taken up this undergraduate program or any of the other programs, please do take them, because for the first time here we have a bunch of kids who join logistics by choice and not by default, as we all are here. Second is, there is a need for some mandatory trainings, and that is inescapable. For example, training on dangerous goods carriage, training for the heavy vehicle drivers, training on protocols for cold chain solutions. These are all inescapable. The Joint Secretary, Logistics Division, flagged the fact that 40% is the wastage in our food products, and that's as much which can feed a country like England. and that's indeed a very sorry state of affairs. The third point that I have is we have the Joint Secretary Ministry of Road Transport. A lot of he mentioned about various projects that are coming up, logistic parks funded by the ADB or World Bank, the multimodal parks, and so on and so forth. Please do factor in for a small logistics training center in all these facilities. It will pay a very rich dividend. Lastly, I think there's a need for existing employees to reskill and upskill, and I think continued learning is going to be the way of life. We have a logistics learning management system in place. Please do use it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Captain Rama Nujam. You've put it all just so well, and you've set the context really well for all of the other speakers who are to follow. And it's quite remarkable the kind of things you're doing. For instance, consolidating almost 800 different job roles into 80. So that's actually the power of standardization, systems, processes, and of course, training. Our next speaker, Mr. George Wong, is from Singapore, a country which consistently is on very much the top of the rankings, both ease of doing business and logistics. And we've spoken about the hard infrastructure, we've spoken about the soft skills and systems. And Singapore is a country I admire greatly because you've pretty much got both sides right. Mr. Wong is currently the managing director and principal consultant of Hocklink Systems and Services. He was a pioneer, key productivity activist to assist in the productivity movement of Singapore. And over the years, he's served actively in several professional organizations, such as the Management Committee of Singapore Productivity Association, or the SPA, the SMF, or the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, and many more. In 2014, he was appointed the Chief Productivity Officer, or the CPO, of Singapore Productivity Center. Before I invite Mr. Wong, may I remind all of our panelists to keep an eye on the chat box, because we're already receiving several very in-depth and well-informed questions. I'll also request our participants to please type in your questions in the chat box. So at the end of the panelists' remarks, we'll, of course, pick a few and I'll pose them to the panel. So, Mr. Wong, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bharat, for all your kind words. I'm actually very honored to be invited to share in this wonderful webinar on transport and logistics services sector. And also to all my friends today, it's really so happy to be able to present and share some thoughts on this productivity journey in our logistics sector. My topic will be focusing specifically on developing and using productivity measurement system for sustainable growth. So I hope that in our numerous enterprises in the logistics sector and also among all the subsectors, many of our enterprises have been applying productivity and quality programs initiative over the years. So I hope that this topic may inspire our enterprises to embark on measurement, as I think we have heard earlier from our first colleague, Ms. Sarok, who I mentioned about the logistic performance management system. Now, measurement is indeed very, very important. Right? So I will maybe share about a framework for our enterprises to consider and apply it within the enterprise, and subsequently to use the collective effort among enterprises in the sector or even within a subsector of logistics to bring everyone together to a higher level of productivity. So in my usual way of starting sessions like this, I like to ask three big questions to the people that we actually share. First question is, why do we need to achieve higher productivity? The next question is, how to achieve higher productivity? And does it really matter to us? The third question. So if we get the response that, oh, really, it's great, it really matters to us. So I think this is a great start for the journey. And as a usual statement that the journey is a destination. So we can start the journey in a very positive, very inspiring way to bring everybody together in the journey. So as we have mentioned about this journey that involved many parties, many partners in this ecosystem. So the very important common understanding among us is that, are we going for productivity or profit? So these questions normally will draw very obvious response that obviously in business owners, business enterprises, profit will be the outcome, final outcome that you want. Yes, it's true. However, I think very important is the organization actually focus on productivity. The picture will change that to the state that productive organization should ultimately be profitable in the long run in a sustainable basis. So productivity and quality are actually very powerful in sustaining our organizations, growing our organization, and making our organization profitable. So the question now is, if it's so important to focus on productivity and quality, so how can we become highly productive? I would like to perhaps start by sharing that the emphasis approach that we can adopt is to focus on value creation. Value creation actually is a very powerful term that we are able to build the organization, to transform organization, to achieve the objective that they have set. So in this case, we can use the concept of value added, VA. This is a term I will share in this webinar that we can consider to apply this concept across our enterprises within our sector. The concept of VA will be very useful for organization because it actually helps us to understand the status of our enterprises, of our organization in terms of productivity and quality. So in productivity, we talk about the waste, and quality, we talk about what's the price that we have to pay to delight a customer, to serve a customer, to meet that requirement. So value-added concept is very powerful in the way that once we understand this concept, we are able to understand the status of our organization. And with this, we are able to, over time, bring our organization to the next level of excellence. So what then is this value add or value added concept? Now, simply, I think enterprises who are actually involved in productivity and quality initiative will know that when we build our organization, we want to create wealth. Wealth creation and wealth generation by the enterprises are actually known as this term value added. Now, this value added concept is very interesting as it complements the financial statements that we commonly use in our enterprises. For example, our balance sheet, profit and loss statement that we use, and we refer it every month to see how well we perform in our business. It complements, it gives another perspective from the
Mr. Wong, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I? Oh, okay. Maybe I will maybe restart. Yeah.
Mr. Wong, we missed only the last minute or so. Isn't that right, Rituparna?
Yes, sir. It was for a very brief moment.
Just the last few seconds.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, then let me just share about this value-added concept. Is it okay now? Is my audio okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's perfect. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so this value-added concept is very interesting because it actually reflects the wealth that's being generated by the enterprise on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and yearly basis. And it complements the financial statement of our organization. For example, our balance sheet and the profit and loss statement. So all the data that actually are appearing in this financial statement, we can use this information and put another perspective from the productivity angle. So this is very interesting. So that from now on, the management and the workforce in the organization are able to see the total picture from financial and productivity angle collectively. And they can actually transform the organization very quickly over time. For example, I just get a very simple example about in a traditional financial statement, we talk about inventory, which we always find this word inventory, the stock we get, the finished good raw materials are all in the asset column. But for productivity, the treatment is slightly different. It's the opposite of that. We look at inventory as waste. So it actually is a very interesting example of an item that is treated from two different perspectives. So obviously, inventory is actually an asset that one you sell them, but if it's unsold and it's kept and become obsolete, it becomes a waste. So it's a very interesting two-dimension information about data in organization. And once we can sum up all the value add of an enterprise together with other enterprise in the subsector or in the sector itself, we can collectively bring all this value add information together, and you can bring up to the national level as a GDP of the country. So this is a very interesting aspect that we can have a common language of bringing all the different services from different mode of business into a common language using a monetary term. And that will bring us to the common understanding of the GDP of the country. So with this value add concept, I just like to just sum up that it helps us to measure our enterprise productivity level and also the growth rate. So this value add concept is very interesting. It shows us two aspects of our productivity effort, of our outcome that we gain from the initiative that we do in productivity and quality, both in terms of productivity level from one period of time to another period, and also the growth rate. So these are very important aspects that value add will show. And very interestingly, that if an enterprise uses this to as part of their organization system, we can link productivity to wages. And this is interesting because it inspires and motivates everybody in the entire workforce to raise the value add in their enterprises. We actually can use it to link with the productivity gain sharing scheme that is actually very motivating to everyone in the organization, regardless of which department they are from. So it's actually a very powerful concept. And it also allows comparison against standards, both nationally, at the national level, or at a sectorial level. So this value add information is now available at enterprise level, at sector level, and also at the national level, where the information is kept at different level. At the national level by the ministry, where we talk about the Department of Statistics, you can look at value add from that area. And we can use it to compare to benchmark against each other. So this is a concept that when enterprises use this, we actually can have two ways of measuring value add. One way is to see how well the organization create the value add. So this is a very simple formula where we take the sales generated in the month minus the bought-in material and services that we have incurred in the month. So that amount, the difference becomes your value add. So when you get this value add created on a very high level, we can actually now consider to distribute this value add gain to the 5 areas in our operation. The first is we must distribute this value add to our labor costs, all right, to wages, the salary of our workforce, depreciation, to actually pay out the interest costs that we actually got from the bank who support us, and to pay taxes. Now, once we create sufficient amount of value add, the balance will become profit. So the fifth dimension of this distribution will be profit, which is the very important aspect that we can inspire all the stakeholders in the enterprise in terms of bonuses, salaries, and retained earnings for the organization. So this is a very, very powerful concept. Now, once we are able to have the enterprises understand how to bring this value add concept into a common practice in the organization by following either the creation method or the addition method, we can now use this value add figure in our computation about our productivity. Now, we all know that productivity have two main components, is output divided by the input, right? So this ratio is a very powerful ratio, but we can use the value add concept to make these two ratios even more useful, right? How we can use this is that for the output component and the input component, we can actually have them classified under 4 productivity levers. So for the output, we can have 2 productivity levers that we can actually measure how well the output is being created. And also for the input, how well are we using the input? So we can have 2 levers. Now, I think these 4 levers that appear in 2 on the output, 2 on the inputs, will give a holistic picture of the company. So for us in the logistic enterprises, we can actually adopt these value add and productivity indicators by actually getting a common understanding, a common correct application of the value add concept and the productivity measurement system. Okay, how can we use it in this measurement system? First, we can actually get the leadership team to understand the value add concept and
Mr. Wong.
indicators. Yes.
Sorry, may I request you to perhaps start concluding, and we could, of course, hear more from you in the Q&A session.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Okay. So with this value add concept, we can actually use it at sectoral level. We can actually use the sharing of these indicators among all our enterprises through different activities like benchmarking research projects, both locally and internationally. And we can also use and build a logistic benchmarking portal where we can actually share among the various enterprises. And in summary, I just want to sum up that enhancing value add at enterprise will actually improve logistic sector value add, which will actually bring up to a higher country GDP. And with this productivity measurement system, we can actually create highly competitive and sustainable high growth logistic enterprises in the years ahead. So with this, I hope that this value add and all the 4 levers and the productivity indicators in the logistic area will actually help our enterprises to become more sustainable with growth and profitability in their journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wong.
Yeah, thank you.
You made a lot of very deep points and one rather provocative suggestion of linking wages with the value added or with productivity. And the point that you make is, and this is very interesting, that this could potentially be done agnostic of department. So that would be something very interesting, and I'm sure it could be one of the outcomes of this discussion. Because as I would remind our audience, that this is hardly one of those discussions where a lot of interesting ideas are discussed and then we just carry on with our lives. It's actually meant to enable a very precise document which will be put forth to the government through the QCI. So, and then of course, all panelists are expected to fill this document, and we're in the process of that. So this could be, and why not have slightly provocative suggestions if you're going to make any at all. May I now request our next speaker, Mr. Saha, to address the gathering. Dr. N.C. Saha is an internationally acclaimed professional with over 30 years of experience in the field of packaging, science, and technology. Currently, he is chairman of Foundation for Innovative Packaging and Sustainability, or FIPS, of India Biomass Project under the Indo-Dutch Sustainability Forum, or INDUS, and also chairman of 5 sectional committees of the BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards. Previously, he was director of the Indian Institute of Packaging under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, India's premier institute of packaging. Dr. Saha, please begin.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bharat. And first of all, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to QCI and also to our Joint Secretary Logistics, Mr. Anand Swarup.
Doctor, you on mute.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Bharat. And first of all, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to QCI and also our Joint Secretary Logistics, Mr. Anand Swarup, the Minister of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, for giving me an opportunity to share my views and experience, what I had the last 30 years in the subject of packaging. I believe, and all of will agree with that packaging is a really an integral part for the logistic and supply chain, especially for the transportation. Because any goods to be transported from one place to another place, you need the media, and that's nothing but the packaging. Today, if you look at about globally, this particular industry, the packaging industry, has already occupied the 9th rank, the topmost and the top among the 10 industries in the world. Globally, the total turnover of the packaging industry is around $975 billion US dollars. In India also, it is around $52 billion US dollar in the Indian packaging industry. We find there are about 22,000 to 24,000 packaging industry in the country. But ironically, about 85% of that comes under the MSME segment. And these are the industry who makes the different kind of packaging material and packages, though we are more concerned to the consumer or the consumer package. But when you talk about the transport package comes also very important because we need to carry the goods from one place to another place. There are many mode of transportation. At the same time, there are various forms and formats of the packages. We get boxes on the different types, wooden box, corrugated fiberboard boxes. We get the drum, the barrel, different kinds of plastic barrel. And on the bigger size, we get IBC, the industrial bulk container. We also get a jumbo bag, which you call flexible intermediate bulk container. The most important comes in transportation and the logistics system comes the quality. The quality of the package, that's the transport packages, needs to be so strong in terms of the mechanical strength so that during the handling, storage and transportation, the packages will not be broken or the damaged condition when the product reaches to a destination, it will reach to a safe and sound condition. Many times when I was in the Ministry of Commerce working in Indian Institute of Packaging, we used to get some complaint that our products are so good in quality, but it reaches to the overseas market, the products are rejected. It's only because of the packaging. And that shows that how much important for packaging for transportation and logistics. And I believe that packaging has to take care of the three important functions like the protection, especially for the transport package. It has to take care of the preservation for the perishable goods because we have a refrigerated van where the fresh frozen produce has to be transported from India to other place, and also the proper information through the proper labeling as per the country of origin or the country who has been importing our goods. And for that, of course, we need a standard which becomes very important. And in our country, the Bureau of Indian Standard is one of the national body of the statutory authority who has formulated a number of packaging standards. Incidentally, I am also responsible, holding the responsibility as the chairman of a 5 different sectional committee of Bureau of Indian Standard. We have formulated a number of packaging standards in the country. But what is actually the few of the important issues I thought that should be raised for the concern to the audience and for all the person or the stakeholders. In our country, there are certain kind of constraint, I should say, that there are the areas which need to look into that. When you talk about the corrugated fiber wood boxes, which is one of the most important transport packaging media among, if you compare with the wooden box or any other plywood box, and this is the most important box or most important packaging media for the transportation. But ironically, our problem is India being a tropical country, we do not have the proper raw material. For making the kraft paper, we need a long fiber, baked, high strength kraft paper pulp. We don't have, because in the tropical country, we do have most of this hardwood. And the softwood gives the long fiber length and which gives the high strength and less absorption of water. But in India, all the kraft paper, mostly it is made from either bamboo or from the bagasse. And as a result, the quality of the packaging in terms of mechanical strength, we find in Indian quality boxes are far inferior than when we talk about the Scandinavian paper. So this is one of the issues we find we have been facing this Indian industry. And even today in the lockdown stage, most of the paper industry, they are in a shortage of the, you say, the recycled material they are getting. They used to get the scrap, they used to import and mix it with the Indian agro-based pulp and make some kind of paper. That's one of the concern what we find in India is happening. The second thing we find on the standards, though the Bureau of Indian Standard has made a number of standards on the packaging material, especially the transport packages, but most of the industry, they're not aware about what are the standards are happening. That is one of the questions. The second question, all the BIS standards are voluntary in nature. They don't care about that, yes, the standard should be followed. As a result, we are unable to produce the good quality of packages and which leads to the damage or during the transit what we find. We also find the palletization and containerization. These are the two important aspects which is a part of your logistic transportation and where the package to be good. We find in many industries they have been doing the container stuffing at the factory place where your handling is very minimized and as a result your package can reach to a destination. But however, most of the industries, as I said, is a small scale industry, they have a shortage of space for the movement of the forklift and as a result they are not having a palletization and containerization system and this needs to be encouraged. So having said that, if you look at about what are the issues or concern or few of my recommendation, what I find that one of the important aspect I find to maintain the quality. Yeah, I just close it. To maintain the quality, we need to have a more encouragement for making the testing laboratory by the industry and to have a more and more setting of the quality control laboratory for in this various packaging unit and the palletization and containerization needs to be more encouraged and we should have a more and more customized training program and skill development program for these so that they can upgrade their knowledge in terms of quality of packaging material. With this, thank you so much. If any more questions on the QA section, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you, Mr. Joshi.
Thank you, Mr. Shah. It was fabulous. And the way you brought out the role of not only packaging as a medium for transport, but also the role of standardization. Next, I'm very pleased to invite my good friend, Shree Ramesh Agarwal, who is the founder of APML. And in India, everybody is familiar with Agarwal Packers and Movers. APML has been certified by the Limca Book of Records for the last 7 years, as well as the World Book of Records in the UK for being the largest mover of household goods every year. Formerly in the Indian Air Force, Mr. Agarwal has served in the most difficult terrains and was conferred the Best Airman Award. He has been unanimously elected thrice in a row to the coveted position of the National President of AITWA, All India Transporters Welfare Association. Rameshji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharati. And thank you, the organizers who has, organized Udyog Manthan, that to relate with the transport and logistics. In fact, जब डॉक्टर NC साहा जब बोल रहे थे तो उन्होंने मेरा काफी काम आसान कर दिया, क्योंकि मेरा जो सब्जेक्ट है कि लॉजिस्टिक एंड कुछ ऐसे लॉसेस जो अनअवॉइडेबल हैं, बट वेरी वेल वी कैन डू समथिंग एंड वी कैन अवॉइड इट. डॉक्टर जोशी जी ने कहा कि दैट द पैकिंग इज वेरी मच कंज्यूम्ड बिकॉज लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट का एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा है विच इज द पैकेजिंग. हमारे इंडियन ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का जो मॉडल है, देयर इज टू टाइप मॉडल्स वी कैरी द गुड्स. वन इज फुल कंटेनर लोड, जो फैक्ट्री और वेयर हाउस से लोड करते हैं एंड इट गोज डायरेक्ट टू डेस्टिनेशन एंड दे अपलोड देयर. देयर इज नो ट्रांसशिपमेंट इन बिटवीन. सेकंड जो गुड्स होती है वो होती है less than container load. What they do less than container load, क्योंकि वो consignment को they have to pick it up through some local vehicles, then dump it to the godown, and this child godown again goes to the mother warehouse. Mother warehouse में again consolidation, फिर mother to mother warehouse at destination. You take it like Delhi to Guwahati, and Guwahati again upload it in a mother to child warehouse, then destination to the client. That means it needs 4 transshipment. And many times you can say 3.8% vehicles gets breakdown on the way, the highways. So वो by default एक transshipment होता है. So this transshipment also takes place many times. That means 4 times transshipment is mandatory and plus 1 sometimes. Transport industry में क्या होता है? More you tranship, more damage. Less you tranship, less damage. Zero you transhipment, zero damage. तो हमने ये सोचा कि वी कैन नेवर डू द जीरो ट्रांसशिपमेंट, बिकॉज जब पार्ट लोड होगा लेस देन कंटेनर इट हैज टू पिक अप, बिकॉज वी द क्लाइंट को वी कैन नॉट गिव अ फुल ट्रक लोड. ओके लोड कर दो, इवन हाफ ट्रक भी है तो वील कैरी इट, इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल. तो एक हमने सपना लिया, ड्रीम लिया, व्हाई नॉट वी डू इट जीरो ट्रांसशिपमेंट इवन अ पार्ट लोड. जब इसके बारे में सोचा तो लोगों ने कहा कि क्या पागल हो रहे हो, क्या बैलेंस शीट कहां जाएंगी. अल्टीमेटली वी हैड ए स्टडी. If you go era 1956, जोशी जी इसको अच्छी तरह जानते होंगे, पूरी पुरानी कहानी पढ़ी होगी. 1956 में जब जनरल कार्गो शिप आता था फ्रॉम एक कंट्री से दूसरे कंट्री में, उसमें जो जनरल गुड्स होती थी लाइक कपड़ा हो, ऑयल हो, कोयला हो, सभी एक शिप में आता था. और जब वो उतरता था, आई थिंक इट टेक्स समवेयर 28 days. और आउट ऑफ 28 days उसमें जो सबसे बड़ा माइनस पॉइंट था, मोर देन 30% गुड्स आपस में मिक्सअप होती थी, मटेरियल खराब हो जाता था, समटाइम्स अनयूजेबल होता था, समटाइम्स रिपेयरेबल होता था. तो ये एक पैनिक था. बट किसी आदमी ने, मैकलिन का नाम आप लोगों ने सुना होगा, उन्होंने जन्म लिया. ही सेड नो, इट कैन बी अवॉइडेड. और उन मैकलिन ने 20 फीट और 40 फीट के कंटेनर का जन्म दिया. एंड एज ऑन टुडे वी कैन से हमारा जो भी मटेरियल वर्ल्ड वाइड कहीं भी आता है जाता है, वी जस्ट लोड इन 20 फीट कंटेनर, 40 फीट, एंड वो स्टैकिंग करते हैं, शिप में चला जाता है. जो 28 days की अनलोडिंग होती थी, इट हैज रिड्यूस्ड टू 8 hours to 10 hours. और जो डैमेजेस था, इट इज नियर टू जीरो. तो उसी तरह हमने सोचा क्यों ना मैकलिन एपीएमएल बन जाए एंड लेट अस स्टार्ट ऑन द सरफेस ऑफ द इंडियन रोड, और हमने उसका ऊपर काम किया एंड हमने कहा कि अब कोई भी किसी का कंसाइनमेंट ट्रांसशिपमेंट नहीं होगा। दैट मीन्स वी आर इन द थॉट प्रोसेस ऑफ जीरो ट्रांसशिपमेंट। वो हुआ कैसे? हमने देखा कि कंसाइनमेंट जो सबसे छोटा होता है जो हमारी इंडस्ट्री के अंदर, दैट इज 500 kg 400 kg, और उसके बाद अप टू 8 टन। तो हमने 500 kg का एक कंटेनर बना दिया, जिस लाइक ISO कंटेनर 20 फीट होते हैं। सिमिलरली दैट इज कॉल्ड साइज इज 4 फीट, अगेन देन 6 फीट। 1 टन का बना दिया, 2 टन, 3 टन, 4 टन, 5 टन, एंड ईच साइज के कंटेनर बना दिए 4 फीट, 6 फीट, 8 फीट, 10 फीट, जिससे 20 फीट के बनते हैं उसी साइज में, बट उसकी लेंथ हमने कम कर दी। और व्हाट वी डू इट, वही कंटेनर एक छोटे से पिकअप वैन में वी टेक टू द क्लाइंट, और क्लाइंट को बोलते हैं इसमें लोड कर दो, यू पुट योर ओन लोड, एंड दिस सेम कंटेनर हमारे मदर वेयर हाउस में आते हैं, और उनको कंसोलिडेट करके 8 to 10 कंटेनर एक लॉन्ग ट्रेलर में वी कैरी टू द डेस्टिनेशन, एंड अगेन वी ऑफलोड इट एंड टेक दिस कंटेनर टू द क्लाइंट हाउस, और क्लाइंट को ही बोलते हैं कि आप अपना ताला अपने सामने खोलो, आपका ताला, आपकी चाबी आपने लगाया, आपने खोला। तो गुड्स ट्रांसशिपमेंट हैज बीन रिड्यूस्ड टू जीरो। और उसके कारण जो यदि हम ये पूरी इंडस्ट्री का कर पाए, तो दैट द सर्वे वी हैव गॉट इट 42,000 of the crores, 42,000 एनुअली एक कॉस्ट आती है हमारी लॉजिस्टिक की, विच इज बिकॉज ऑफ ट्रांसशिपमेंट। ये 42,000 करोड़ 42,000 करोड़ वी कैन सेव इट डायरेक्टली, जस्ट नथिंग। अब क्वेश्चन ये आता है कि भी कंटेनर्स इतने बनाएंगे तो इट विल बी एडिशनल कॉस्ट, ये तो कॉस्ट बढ़ जाएगी, मगर कॉस्ट बढ़ी नहीं, अगेन इट रिड्यूस टू 7 to 8%। जब हमने इसमें काम किया, बिकॉज जब भी कोई कंसाइनमेंट पार्सल कंपनी, लेस देन ट्रक वाली कंपनी जो पिक करके लाती है, दे हैव टू कीप दिस गुड्स फॉर कंसोलिडेशन अंडर वन रूफ। उनके पास कवर्ड वेयर हाउस होते हैं, दैट कॉस्ट अप्रोक्सीमेटली 16 रुपीज पर स्क्वायर फीट। और हम जो अपना गुड्स जो पिकअप करके लाते हैं थ्रू द स्मॉल कंटेनर्स, वी जस्ट कीप इन द ओपन, दैट कॉस्ट 1 रुपीज 80 पैसा, हार्डली 2 रुपीज पर स्क्वायर फीट। तो कहाँ तो 16 रुपीज स्क्वायर फीट हुआ, कहाँ 2 रुपीज हुआ, इससे 14 रुपीज पर स्क्वायर फीट हम एक वेयर हाउस की कॉस्ट यहाँ बचाते हैं, और 14 रुपीज एट डेस्टिनेशन बचाते हैं, विच अगेन रिड्यूस आवर कॉस्ट। तो टोटल कॉस्ट यदि होती भी है तो हमारी कॉस्ट 7 to 8% लेस आती है। तो हमने ये प्रोसेस एक करके देखा प्रैक्टिकली, और बहुत ही एक्सेप्टेड हुआ, और लोगों ने कहा कि जो पैकेजिंग कॉस्ट होती थी, उस पैकेजिंग कॉस्ट का भी हमने अप्रोक्सीमेटली 30 to 40% कम कर दिया। बिकॉज पैकेजिंग एक अजम्पशन पे होती है कि यू विल हैव 4 ट्रांसशिपमेंट, द प्लाई इन प्लेस ऑफ 5, और क्राफ्ट पेपर 100 ग्राम्स 120 ग्राम्स यू कैन, बिकॉज जब मोर ट्रांसशिपमेंट होंगे तो एडवाइजर या क्वालिटी कंट्रोल वाले कहेंगे इसमें इतना ज्यादा डाल दो, तो दैट कॉस्ट अगेन गोज 30 to 35%। पर हमारा तो ट्रांसशिपमेंट है ही नहीं उसके अंदर, तो दैट कॉस्ट हैज बीन रिड्यूस्ड बाय 30 to 32%। ये हो गया। इसमें एक चीज अनसीन, वो बहुत बड़ा हमारे देश में हो रहा है, जो हम देख नहीं पा रहे और हम कर नहीं पा रहे आज के दिन, बिकॉज वो अभी नोटिस में ही नहीं आया। जब गुड्स आती है पार्ट लोड के अंदर, लेस देन ट्रक लोड के अंदर, अल्टीमेटली इट हैज बीन टेकन टू द वेयर हाउस, और वेयर हाउस के अंदर डिफरेंट टाइप का प्रोडक्ट रहता है, मोर देन 100 टाइप का प्रोडक्ट रहता है। अज्यूम करो एक प्रोडक्ट वेयर हाउस के अंदर ऑलरेडी लगा हुआ है, डिटर्जेंट सोप या अगरबत्ती या टायर, उसके पास लाकर उसने पार्ट लोड रख दिया, मैगी बिस्किट कुछ भी हो, और वो नेक्स्ट डे दे हैव लोडेड द थिंग द ट्रक, और गलती से नीचे साबुन डिटर्जेंट रख दिया, उसके ऊपर दे हैव पुट द फूड आइटम और फार्मा आइटम, एंड इट गोज टू 6 to 7 days एट डेस्टिनेशन। वहां अपलोड करने के बाद दैट मटेरियल कम्स अंडर स्कैनर ऑफ रेनसिडिटी। जब रेनसिडिटी कुछ भी अपना प्रभाव डालती है, अंडर एनीथिंग विच कम्स अंडर रेनसिडिटी एंड फूड एंड फार्मा विद द कनेक्शन ऑफ this is like detergent and there are the 32 items, so 24 to 48 hours में they expire much before expiry। हमारा आइटम बाई करने का एक मोड होता है कि we just check expiry date, उसमें देखते हैं और ये तो अपना दिसंबर 2021 है, मगर वो 24 घंटे पहले, वो तो आज ही 24 घंटे में एक्सपायर हो चुका, क्योंकि फूड एंड फार्मा किसी के कनेक्शन में आता है तो इट इज नॉट ए फिट फॉर ईटेबल्स। तो इस तरह का हमारा हमेशा आज लाखों करोड़ का नुकसान होता होगा। एग्जाम्पल की तरह बताता हूँ, कोई किराना शॉप वहां आप डिटर्जेंट सोप ले लो, साथ में बिस्किट और चिप्स के पैकेट ले लो, कीप इन वन basket or in one carry bag, keep on the dining table. You start eating tomorrow next day morning. I think you cannot eat it, क्योंकि दोनों अलग अलग पैक जरूर है, मगर रेंसिडिटी ने उनको मार दिया, एक्सपायर कर दिया मच बिफोर एक्सपायरी। तो इस तरह का फूड पता नहीं कितना हम खाते हैं, बोलते हैं कि दवाई इफेक्टिव नहीं है, वो तो ट्रांसपोर्टर ने उसको साबुन के साथ ले जाकर इफेक्टिवनेस खत्म कर दी। मतलब ये तो वोमिटिंग हो रही है। तो मैनी थिंग्स हैपन। तो इस तरह से कितना हमारा लाखों का नुकसान हो रहा होगा, ये भी एक है। तो हमने सबने सोचा कि एटलीस्ट ये जो एक स्मॉल कंटेनर्स है, इन्होंने इसका एक नया सोल्यूशन दिया है। तो APML हैज कम आउट मोर देन 3000 कंटेनर्स, स्मॉल कंटेनर्स स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम 4।
रमेश जी एक्सक्यूज मी, थोड़ा सा वाइंड अप करेंगे प्लीज, थैंक यू।
हाँ, तो इस तरह का एक नया सोच बनी। तो कहने का मतलब यही है कि इंडस्ट्री के अंदर यदि हम कुछ भी इनोवेशन लाएंगे तो ही हमारी कॉस्ट डाउन होगी, लॉजिस्टिक हमारे को नाम पर रखेंगे। और एक ह्यूमन, एक आदमी कहते हैं ना कि उसको पता नहीं क्या तकलीफ है, वो तकलीफ लॉजिस्टिक को ही ढूंढनी पड़ेगी। और इस बात पे मैं थैंक यू वेरी मच, सब लोगों ने सुना और मेरे को टाइम मिला। वंस मोर थैंक यू वेरी मच।
रमेश जी बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। APML has been very innovative of course, so thank you for that sir. Next I invite my friend Mr. KV Mahidhar, who heads the CII Institute of Logistics, spearheading the logistics competitiveness in the country. He's involved in formation of Logistics Sector Skill Council with over 28 years of experience in conceptualizing, establishing and administrating various grading programs covering warehousing, resource management, etc. And presently he's leading a team of professionals to facilitate national logistics and supply chain management in the country. Mr. Mahidhar, please, we look forward to hearing from you.
Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you, Chairman, and all the panelists and the organizers for giving this opportunity. I could see some time pressure, so I would like to make a brief point. I have 4 headings here to talk about. One is standardization in logistics. I think that is one subject which can bring enormous amount of change in the way we work on logistics, that can bring quality, that can bring productivity, that can bring repeatability, comparability, adaptability. So we are driving this initiative as an industry association amongst the logistics sector, working very closely with government. For example, Mr. Anand Sarup, Joint Secretary, also mentioned yesterday that touch upon what is the importance of having a reasonably acceptable single pallet size as a part of standardization. If you see typically we talk about RHTP, racking, handling, transportation, and palletizing. The starting point here is pallet. If you have a single pallet size, say 1200 mm by 1000 mm, that can decide how the racking design should be in a warehouse, how one has to handle in a transportation in terms of width of the truck body and the height of the truck body, and also in terms of handling equipment design and utilization. So with one standard called pallet size, we can work around with that size on other elements of the other equipment of the logistics. So just giving an example. Similarly, we would like to work on standards in warehousing. For example, type of flooring we should go for, the type of roofing we should go for. We have been closely working with government along with our CA office bearers to come out with standards for the country to start with on a voluntary basis. Slowly, country can adopt very widely. So this is one I would mention as the standards. Second thing is certifying our logistics facility, the logistics services. So what I'm trying to mention here is there is a great scope for us to improve the quality and productivity by identifying on certain parameters how one can rate these warehouses. For example, if you recall the similar analogy what Bureau of Energy Efficiency brought very successfully for all the domestic equipment like air conditioners, refrigerators, geysers, on single star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, etc. The same way, once we start rating this logistics facility on a given parameters and rating, so that gives good opportunity for the warehouse players to improve, where are they right now, and what are the opportunities available for them to improve. And even the customers can understand at what level of efficiency and operations the warehouses, what they are using are working. So this is what we call it as item number 2 is certifying the facilities of logistics. Third one is, like we already listened, Captain Ramanjam mentioned about skill development and capability improvements in the country. Apart from what we are doing, was as mentioned by Captain, we also need to look into what are the internationally accepted practices, systems that can be brought to India also. I would like to quote Mr. Bharat Joshi involvement along with our Japanese counterparts at Japan Institute of Logistics and ministry there, and also the ministry in India where Anand Swarup took the lead. We brought the Kaizen way of looking at implementation of Kaizen practices in warehouses. We trained and certified professionals in this area, and in fact, first batch is coming out in February first week, and we are going to work again with the same organization, MIT Japan and Japan Institute of Logistics, what we can further do in this area. So I'm giving an example. Similarly, we are signed up with the logistics, Singapore Logistics Association, to bring in what are the practices and the courses that are happening in Singapore for the logistics and supply chain. The first course we are launching on February 22nd for our country. So apart from what we are seeing as the basic learning and capabilities improvement, we also look into this sector as aspirational sector. That is possible by connecting with international practices, international certifications, international acceptabilities. So these standards in logistics, standards in facilities, certifying our professionals and learning the practices what other countries are doing will definitely bring the quality and productivity in our logistics. Last point is most important. By doing all these things, we have been working for the last few years, and the government is also very handsomely working here, is on improving the image of the sector. If the quality is there, the image of the sector will improve. If the image of the sector improves, further we can attract good professionals in this sector, good investments in this sector, technology into this sector. It will further grow and further improve the quality and productivity. In fact, apart from all these business requirements, etc., we also are launched very recently in December, Women in Logistics. So gender balance is required in our logistics sector in India. What we are driving in this concept called Women in Logistics, Livelihood, Leadership. So with this, I will close my comments here. Over to Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vaidar, for not only being very articulate as usual, but also being very concise with your points. Our next speaker is Shree Santosh Kumar Jha, who holds the present assignment of Executive Director Operations at the very large and very widely known CONCOR, Container Corporation of India, under the Ministry of Railways. The Jha has worked for 21 years in the railways in different departments of operations, commercial, safety, and administration. Jha has also handled the assignment of Executive Director Strategic Planning, besides heading 2 regions, North Central Region and Northern Region of CONCOR as Chief General Manager. So all very important positions. Mr. Jha, please, I request you now come and address them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Joshi and all the panelists. I'll come straight away to the point. So globally, 75% of the break bulk cargo that is being shipped is containerized, whereas in India it is to the extent of around 50%. So there is a huge potential of containerization in this country. So I can very safely say that this is a sunrise industry. Container logistics, therefore, becomes of paramount importance for the next decade, at least. India handles only 2 to 3% of the global container business. And the infrastructure in the service industry for container handling is largely fragmented and is still developing. Indian logistics industry, if I talk about, is perceived to be valued around 215 billion US dollars by 2022. And for last 5 years, it has grown at a CAGR of around 8%. But for the next 5 years, the projected growth is around 10.5%. So again, the industry is looking up globally as well as in India. It employs globally around 40 million people, whereas in India alone, it employs around 22 million people in the logistics industry. Overall, port container throughput in India was around 14 million TEUs in 1819 and a little more in 1920. But as I said, it is merely 1.6% of global volumes. The important thing here is that in India, the roads carry around 57% of freight volume, and rail is 36%, waterways 6%, and air merely 1%. We will discuss about this model split a little later. The number of vessels that come to Indian major ports are around 20,000 annually, which again, due to pandemic in the Q4 of 1920, did much improvement. So it was at the same level as that of 1890. With these basic statistics, just for churning, I thought as a preamble. So when we talk of quality service can be produced by quality infrastructure and quality manpower and training. So quality manpower and quality training has already been addressed by previous speakers. As far as quality infrastructure for container handling, container logistics is concerned, the container handling terminals are still archaic, dilapidated, or in the development mode. And it needs to be equipped with the modern infrastructure and robust modern equipments because it will lead to better productivity. So the age of ICDs, inland container depot, is gone, and the era of multimodal logistic parks is on, and therefore the first mantra for today should be development of multimodal logistic parks for container logistics, for quality infrastructure and quality service. Multimodal logistic parks are going to be the game changers. The minimum basic facilities to handle containers like paved container handling area, modern heavy-duty reach stackers, gantry cranes, empty handlers, state-of-the-art modern warehousing, facilities for palletization, value-added services, which has been ignored so far, should all be part of a complete solution at MMLPs, multimodal logistic parks. In fact, freight aggregation, bonded cargo keeping, packaging, labeling, marking, all these were never considered as part of the terminal operation. So the takeaway point should also be that MMLP should be one-stop solution for quality as well as efficiency and productivity. Now coming to the great hiatus between demand and supply of warehousing, especially post GST era, where the consumption centers are lacking, number one, in the number of warehouses, and number two, the modern warehouses. Again, the mantra is that state-of-the-art warehousing in the consumption centers needs to be developed, whether by private entrepreneurs, PPP model, or by government, like Central Warehousing Corporation, etc. But what is more important, and especially in the pandemic era, is the development of cold chain logistics, which is growing at abysmally low rate in our country. And therefore, there is a big gap between the demand and supply for cold chain. One of the previous speakers has already spoken about the loss of fresh fruits and vegetables in the transportation because of poor infrastructure. The latest is the ice battery technology from Japan for movement and storage of the cold chain products, be it meat, be it milk product, fruits, vegetables, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, drugs, whatever. It is a magical technology. The products remain at minus 21 degrees for 36 hours on road. And in our country now, it is being imbibed by certain organizations, including mine. On the quality side, I thought that on macro level, these points need to be borne in mind. Whereas on the productivity side, as I began with the modal split, I said that India is still dependent on road heavily. 57% is being carried by road, 36% by rail, 6% by water. I would like to inform that 1 liter of fuel carries only 24 tons by road, 85 tons by rail, and 105 tons by water. And the cost of carriage is rupees 2.28 per ton by road, 1.41 rupee by rail, and 1.19 rupee by water. But look at the development of waterways in India, it's merely dependence only 6%. Similarly, a large coastline of 7,500 kilometers in this country carries only 7% of domestic container cargo. And therefore, the present government has put a lot of emphasis on Sagarmala project, coastal shipping, and in development of inland waterways by developing on priority top 6 national waterways. So again, mantra is for improving the productivity, dependence on rail and water should be increased. Now, the question is, if we talk about seamlessness of the various modes of transport, then the concept of complementarity and competition has to be brought in. If I can give a very small analogy, like in Singapore or Hong Kong, and even in many European countries, you buy just one ticket and you can travel in steamer, you can travel on road, you can travel in rail. Why not one common e-way bill for seamless transportation of the container by revenue apportionment later on? So that is again, maybe it's a disruptive idea, but in the times to come, it is going to happen for seamless operations and commercial activity in logistics sector. The dwell time of containers has been talked about, and still the challenges that encouragement of DPD, direct port delivery containers, has not taken the right momentum. My personal suggestion would be to enhance the productivity. It should be linked to incentive, because it is always in the interest of CFS operators not to go for DPD. And therefore, I personally believe that if we incentivize DPD, it will definitely improve the dwell time at ports. Now, coming to the turnaround of containers and turnaround of trains. Just like passenger trains, now Indian Railways have on experimental basis started scheduled freight trains. In fact, Container Corporation has been given 22 such major schedules on major OD streams, but then it should be the rule of the law, especially post DFC when a lot of capacity will be released on Indian Railways. Indian Railway must run scheduled freight services, because for time immemorial, the customer is concerned with assured transit time, which we are not able to provide. So that is the third takeaway point from my side. Now, coming to the empty running, that is wastage of rolling stock. See, if I give example of Indian Railways, today 35 to 40% of the rolling stock runs empty, and the cost is borne by the customer because it is embedded in the freight structure. If I take example of Container Corporation of India, my empty running is only 10%, 8 to 10%. So maybe I'm a little more efficient, but because I have designed my OD streams like that, but the need of the hour is that empty flat running has to be minimized, optimized to 5%, not more than 5%. And therefore, the sectoral locations of industry by the government has to be in such a way that it matches the OD stream. Now, double stack container operations is new in India, and it is already giving a lot of dividends to the customers in terms of lesser freight rate on the upper deck and carrying larger volumes through double stack and long haul. Yeah, Bharat, I'll just take one more minute. That's all. Now, first mile and last mile connectivity is the last mantra for container logistics because customer doesn't want to deal with so many transporters, and therefore every terminal has to have FMLM facility, and there is a hidden demand because it reduces the cost because of the telescopic operations, both at the originating station and the destination station. My last point would be that with the commissioning of dedicated freight corridor, now the transit times are going to be halved. The volumes are going to be doubled or rather quadrupled because 360 containers on one long haul train will be carried. But are we prepared at the terminals or at the ports with the infrastructure to handle that kind of volume? Therefore, terminal infrastructure at the hinterland as well as the gateway port needs to be developed. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and the questions are invited, maybe in the form of chat box, which I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jha. You brought in the perspective of not only someone who clearly knows the sector really well, but also a practitioner who's actually implementing much of what we're discussing here. And you also did what a lot of us should have done earlier, which is to underline the role of containerization in multimodality, because that is one of the devices that enables multimodality or even intermodality. Last but certainly not least is Mr. Sumesh Rahavendra, who has over 17 years of vast experience across product, CX, sales and commercial roles. He started his career at DHL, where he spent a decade across Asia, Europe and Africa. He's worked with Amazon in Europe, and which is essentially Germany and Spain. And most recently, Sumesh spent the last couple of years at Swiggy, leading CX in Bangalore and Scootsy in Mumbai. And presently he leads sales and customer success at Freight Tiger. Sumesh, please, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bharat. There is a certain amount of pressure that comes with being the last speaker because essentially I'm the only one between you and at the end of the session or Q&A. So I'll try and keep this really brief. Essentially, from Freight Tiger's perspective and the approach we've taken is when you talk about logistics in India and when you talk about road freight in India, typically it's always very easy to shift the blame and say the issues with infrastructure and the issues with the sort of regulations and so on and so forth, right? The approach we've taken is how can we use technology to solve for a lot of these problems? Right, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So, one of the things that struck me very odd coming from Swiggy is we had more visibility and tracking options for a 99 rupees biryani as compared to the amount of visibility and tracking that a road freight cargo that's worth crores of rupees has, and it's ironic that today you can go and order food from Swiggy and know exactly where the driver is, but it's very hard to have that same tech intervention for a very valuable heavyweight cargo. So what we've done is used a sort of array of technologies, not just limited to GPS, but including SIM-based tracking, because a lot of the transport drivers today don't really have smartphones. So how can we get around that? And today we're pretty much able to track, hundreds of thousands of trucks that travel across India, and we have about 2 to 3% of all trucks in India going through our platform. Just the power of something like that and using technology to solve those problems is really inspiring. The second part is, the inefficiencies in terms of utilization and the inefficiency that exists in terms of optimizing for space on the truck. On an average, a truck, bleeds about 50% of cost just with underutilization or inefficient utilization, right? And how do you use technology to solve for that in terms of either helping build smarter ways to load a truck and or understanding, the kind of technology that exists to be able to predict when a truck is going to be free and already booking it on the next job, and so on and so forth, right? The other challenge here is, with payment cycles, right? And this is where, a public-private partnership would really be helpful, which is, today, typically a sales order today, and freight payments take anywhere from 60 to 180 days. And just this long process and paperwork involved increases the financing cost to about 2.5% of the freight value, which is huge. And it's not like, the large corporations bear this cost. It's the small and mid-sized transporters that bear this cost. And eliminating that paperwork and going through a completely digital process where by the end of the journey, a transporter is already ready to present the invoice is going to make a huge difference in making enterprise more efficient. Not only in the transporter side, but also the consignor side. And lastly, one of the most or one of the least talked about participants in the entire transport ecosystem is the driver. Really solving for the driver's challenges and looking at digital literacy and how you're able to train and educate the drivers on how to use technology and how to become savvy with using tech to solve some of the challenges they have is a huge challenge, especially with potentially hundreds of thousands of truck drivers that we have around the country. And again, here a public-private partnership in terms of how do you create a driver literacy program, not just from a traditional literacy standpoint, but also from a digital literacy standpoint, is something that's going to be significant in helping solve some of these challenges. And really, again, I don't want to sort of keep going because I know we're short on time. But essentially, we have, and what we've done is not just empty talk, right? We clock about 5 million annual trips on our platform with over 500,000 trucks, unique trucks, and we have thousands of transporters on our platform, and we've shown and demonstrated that technology can help solve a lot of these challenges. And hopefully, it is our sort of vision that we use forums like these to showcase the power of technology and how it can help solve a lot of the challenges that otherwise seem so large. Hopefully we get something out of this in terms of either a partnership or a working group that can sit and help solve for some of these challenges in a more structured way. So that's about it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sumesh. You brought great perspective to the entire conversation. I like how you said that today the traceability and the tracking power that goes into a product which is less than 100 rupees in value is the same as very recently something which would track something of a much higher value. And I'm sure this kind of insight is why everybody has stayed on so long to hear you speak. So thank you for that, Sumesh. In fact, as I go through my notes, each one of the speakers so far has brought in not only very independently well thought through insights, which is very hard to do in about 10 minutes or less. How do you package a depth of experience and knowledge, and at the same time you leave a little bit over for a Q&A. And happily there is a meeting of the minds because there are some overlapping themes. And of course we did say that, look, let's focus on productivity and quality, for instance. But things like intermodality, multimodality, almost by every speaker as far as I could tell. Mr. Swaroop referred to the cost, of course, at an overall economy level, at a macro level, and how the inflationary components were indirect, but not the direct aspects. And that actually is more elusive and more nuanced in how do you go about approaching management of those. We, of course, have some very interesting questions about this and more about big data, track and trace, and so on, which we'll come to. Mr. Singh, of course, again spoke about how road still bears some 60% or even more of India's freight, and how this further inflates both cost and the timetable. Ms. Ayush, of course, spoke in very great detail about the LPI and possibly developing new measurement frameworks for India, and how logistics drives competitiveness. And this is also very closely related to what Sumesh said. So while your product might be great, if you don't have the logistics to deliver it, that could very much be the make or break aspect for your story. Captain Rama Nujam, I think it was brilliant how he said that in many cases our infrastructure or equipment isn't really fitted for purpose, rather we improvise or we retrofit to make the very best of it. So that was true and very interesting. And also you said that here, perforce, we are all multitaskers. It's the norm, not the exception. Mr. Wong, of course, his very stimulating and provocative ideas, great framework. And I think the others also echoed your thoughts on why we shouldn't look at an accretive, value-added framework. Indeed, this is what India has done recently with the GST, or this unified tax system of the goods and services tax, which is based on this same logic of the value added in each stage. So of course, I mean, that's something we should look at, possibly. Dr. Saha, I think, very in-depth chat on how packaging in some ways is almost essential for transport, and the more exacting the product or the length of transport, the more important this medium becomes. Rameshji, of course, has been innovating, since the very inception of his company, and these things sound very simple to say, but in the scale of the Indian economy, how do you do away with transshipment? That's something he's achieved. So fabulous achievements there. Mr. Mahindar, again, as did many of you, spoke about standardization in logistics and how important it will be to implement the star rating system, both for providers of logistics such as ourselves, but also the users. So this is a win-win. And users spoke about electronics and white goods and how the star system is something we now, just look at it. But maybe the first thing we look at, almost like you look at the brand. Mr. Jha, of course, spoke very much in depth about containerization and how there's so much headroom for growth. And despite very strong growth, we are still expecting of something like I think you said, a 10% CAGR in the next 5 years. So I think that's very, very positive indeed going forward. And Sumesh, I just referred to your discussion most recently, but fabulous. I think technology has become one of the huge drivers, and especially to Sumesh's point, but also what a lot of you might have alluded to. Maybe one of the outcomes of this entire panel discussion could be the role of technology. Well, there are some questions which I had highlighted. So, Mr. Alok Jain, how do we do this? Do we unmute people who will ask questions, or should I just ask the question to the panel? What's the...
Sir, you may ask the questions to the panelist.
Fabulous. So now, a lot of these questions have been answered already on the chat box, because that's how vibrant this panel is, so that the panelists have discussed. But okay, if I may just paraphrase. Now, big data or data analytics, AI, artificial intelligence, blockchain, or this decentralized ledger are all very powerful technologies, which are only becoming more effective by the day almost. And the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of digitization and technology. So from the panel, please just put your hands up and start speaking. How do you think these technologies in particular and tech more broadly will continue to transform logistics and also drive productivity? Yes, Mr. Bhaida, go first.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm happy to hear the question from you, because you are also driving this initiative with CII, how the digitization is required for our industry. I'll mention only 2 points here. One is, as we are seeing the importance of the multimodal logistics, to make that dream a reality, I think digitization is extremely important. The second thing is, even on the softer side, we have been talking about single document to ensure that the seamless movement of goods, and also most importantly the information and the regulatory issues and the process work, etc., could be met if you adopt the tools what you mentioned. So the importance of this technology is extremely going forward, could be seen as a game changer for our logistics. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else wish to respond?
This is Anant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you raised a very valid point. We also know that in order to bring in efficiency, digitalization is the key word. And the logistics division is working on a digital mission for logistics, where we are trying to digitalize all the processes, we are trying to digitalize all the documents. Not only that, we are also trying to digitalize the entire ecosystem of logistics. We are trying to map on a real-time basis how my logistics is performing, how is my national highways performing, where are my choke points, how do I build infrastructure. We are also looking at the documentation digitalization. How do we digitalize our proof of delivery? How do we digitalize our shipping bills? So these are some works in progress, and I'm sure in times to come, people would get benefited from these initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And, I just must put on record that this is something which we actually witnessed in the last year, that the government, in every ministry, but especially in the Commerce Ministry and the Department of Logistics, we saw that the government was actually taking the lead. And the private sector was actually running faster to catch up, because that is how fast policy was tweaked and new laws implemented and even drafted and technology embraced. So, and that is, I think, not going to change in this year or the next. I don't think we're going to go back to paper again after having experienced the benefits of this. Thank you so much, sir. Would anyone else care to respond to this, or can we go further on?
I just have one little point to add, Captain Ramanujam here. I think Mr. George had brought up this concept of value add, right, concept. And that's really taken on, especially in the aftermarket for automotive spares. You don't see such big inventories with dealers, etc., because now there's a lot one hubbing which goes on. And even if unfortunately, if somebody lands up a bashed up car at the garage, he tells you that, I'll let you know in a day. And then he finds out when the spares is going to fetch up at the garage and tell you that the next day he'll deliver the car. So in the sense, a lot of rationalization in the aftermarket has already happened, and it will increase.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Bharat, can I? This is Saroj here.
Yes, please.
So, just to moderate expectation on digitalization, it is not all as rosy as it appears to be. So there is a word of caution which one should keep in mind. So with information comes power, and then obviously comes responsibility. So if you start competing that you want to reach a particular good in 22 minutes flat, you're also raising questions on the bike riders' behavior, on the safety on the road, the kind of congestion that you would be putting. So there needs to be a little bit of regulation to more put into the responsibility into the service provider. So you can't really compete on a particular aspect which has negative externalities, is I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And we have a related question from Mr. Lakshmikant Mishra, who says, technology is, of course, all well and good, but how do we ensure that the truck driver or the delivery executive on the bike is able to not only handle technology, but also take care of these other risk factors? I wonder if Sumesh would like to come in for this.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I just want to be clear on the point I made earlier, right? Efficiency cannot come at all costs, especially at the human cost. So for what we're trying to do is, this also needs to be looked into with perspective, right? I mean, today a truck driver driving carefully or recklessly is not a consequence of him or her having access to technology. And that's a very important point, which, I stressed on especially, which is a huge challenge today, is about driver education, right? And the ability for us to, because they are such an important participant in the ecosystem, that being able to educate them on how to use technology productively and how it's an enabler to help them do their job better, rather than using technology or blaming technology to be a sort of a bane to what they're doing, right? The same driver today, if they have access to where there is a traffic block, where there has been an accident, where there is an issue on the road, is able to navigate around those and actually do better for himself or herself and for the goods that they carry, right? That's where technology comes into play. For them to be able to digitally sign off and provide proof of delivery means they don't have to actually drive all the way back to the point of origin to submit a few pieces of paper, right? That's the power of technology. It actually enables them to get better at what they're doing. And obviously there is a huge element of educating them here, and that's the key.
Thank you, Sumesh.
I have one little point to make. Since the JSMORTH is here, my request...
Just a minute. So I see we're already past 6, and we're having a lot of questions coming in, which is a great thing. So with the permission of all panelists, could we extend this time by another 5 minutes? Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
So silence means you're all okay. So Captain, please.
Yeah, I just have one little point. The government has stipulated that the educational levels is minimum. I mean, an illiterate person can become a driver. I think it's high time, with vehicles becoming more and more sophisticated. A Bharat 6 vehicle has almost 200 odd sensors. And with technology coming into play, I think there's a minimum need for an 8th class qualification for a driver, or if not 10th. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, we have a question from one of our Japanese participants. And since it's practically Saturday in Japan, I think we should really take this question. And the question is on RFID as a technology. Are RFID tags also a useful technology for tracking? And whoever would like to please take this question.
I would. Yeah, it's a very useful technology, and I'm happy to report that now in India, 100% of the EXIM containers are tracked on a real-time basis. And we have mandated that every container that lands on the port has to be necessarily tagged with an RFID tag. And we have readers all across the country. So that movement is being tracked end to end. So that technology is useful. It's already implemented in India. Yeah, thanks.
What a stupendous achievement, 100% RFID tagging and tracking and tracing across the country. Fabulous, absolutely.
Mr. Joshi, further to add Mr. Anand's point, I would like to suggest that in warehouse which we are going to have in the MMLP, this will have a mandatory condition for the concessionaire that your all container should be able to be located by the help of digitalization. So this RFID technology has to be used mandatorily. And with regard to the driver, somebody told, driver, we are thinking something that how he becomes digitally literate, whether by way of the minimum educational qualification or by some way of this IT application, but it related to the employment also. So it is being examined by the ministry, and we are thinking something about this. So how to make them digitally literate? So it will not be linked to the some kind of educational qualification, whether some kind of digital literacy is required or that is being examined by the ministry. And this driver empowerment program is also being monitored by the Ministry of Logistics also, I mean Ministry of Commerce. So they are also on this job. So driver empowerment will also include how they are becoming digitally literate so they can handle this issue. That's all.
That would be great, sir, and happy to cooperate in any way and work together because we deal with hundreds of thousands of drivers every day. That's amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, and that just goes to underline the level of alignment and clarity of thinking across ministry. So absolutely fabulous. Now, if I may take a last question, and this question actually is from, sorry, just a second, it's right here. Yes, it was on RoRo or roll-off on vehicles, which is very successful, especially in Konkan railways, according to this question, but perhaps not equally successful elsewhere. So, if anyone has any learnings or any views on this, please do tell us.
If Santosh can answer, otherwise I have some experience on that also.
Yeah, sure. So as far as RoRo is concerned, Delhi NCR has already operated RoRo in the past, recent past, 6-7 months back, and it is a reality on Konkan Railway. And even now, Container Corporation and DFCCIL will also be running RoRo on container flat trains.
The challenge with RoRo is that the OHE, if it is an electrified track, then on the upper side there is a possibility of infringement happening because the truck size is not uniform in this country. Konkan Railway has been success because it's a diesel territory, it's not electrified. So that is the challenge. But we are identifying certain routes where there is a possibility to run RoRo, and then we'll have to map where are the infringements happening. We have to look at the FOBs, we have to look at ROBs. Their heights have to be raised so that our RoRo can work on those routes.
Yeah.
If I can come in for a minute. In fact, RoRo is not only limited to the railways.
A bit louder, ma'am, please.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So RoRo is not only limited to railways because the National Waterway is not represented over here. RoRo is a big time effort even on the National Waterway 1. And even in West Bengal, the RoRo facilities are being developed where the trucks can actually move off the road and reduce congestion by utilizing these national waterways.
Thank you for that, ma'am. Now, thank you all so much. And there are questions, if you can believe it, which are still trickling in at this this very 11th hour. Now, we can't continue to keep taking questions, but I think we can all take away that this is, Captain Ramanujan did say something about logistics not being aspirational, but it's perhaps changing because there is such excitement, at least in this Q&A chat box, that it makes us feel that it's not aspirational, it's at least something which is exciting or stimulating for conversation. I think it's now just a very happy job for me to hand over it back to the organizers and thank all panelists and especially both honorable joint secretaries for their time and their insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joshi, for fantastically steering the deliberation and for being such a fantastic moderator, and also for summarizing the discussion so articulately in the end. I would also like to extend our gratitude to Joint Secretaries, Mr. Anand Swaroop and Mr. S.P. Singh, for gracing this event with their presence and setting up the context for the session. I would also like to thank all the illustrious panelists for deliberating on the issues of quality and productivity in this industry. And I also further request all the experts to spare some time from their busy schedule and provide the recommendations and suggestions in the template forwarded to you by Mr. Alok Jain. And as it will help us create a compendium of quality related sectoral recommendations, which will be shared with the ministry and concerned departments. And I would also like to thank Ms. Manisha Meena for her kind support to make this deliberation a success. Furthermore, I would like to thank all the attendees for participating, especially in the Q&A session. Here I conclude the session, and goodbye and have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
हम लोग को बंद भी करना होगा ना.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.